Nathan, everyone.
You doing great?
Nathan, so one question I just want to ask before you start is we got to the point where everything seems to be, it seems like the design system on its own, or managing design system, is a work on its own.
Yes.
And one of the things that also often comes up is when do you know that the design system is actually working? Like if you had to think, oh, sorry, I know I'm putting you right on spot.
That's a whole different talk.
I know. But when you think about, so you have a design system, and does anybody feel like, okay, let me ask you differently. Who feels that the design system that you're working on is up to date today? Working flawlessly is great. Okay, who does not think so? Can we fix that? Nathan?
Yes, we can make it better.
All right, so give it up to Nathan, who will tell us how to fix it.
Hello, everybody. My name's Nathan Curtis. I'm a design system consultant, and I've been working on design systems since before we called them design systems. They used to be like pattern libraries, component libraries. You can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter with Nathan A. Curtis. And in particular, you can also, like any Strava geeks out there, I live close to Washington, D.C. in the United States. So I live west, if you're familiar with Dulles Airport. That's in the left-hand side of this visualization. And my geeky pursuit over the last year and a half has been to ride every single cul-de-sac and road emanating from where I live. And I've gotten to about a 12 by 12 mile space of thousands of miles. So this is my goal. I will fill in a lot more of this map by the time I see you again, maybe years in the future. And so people know me because part of my passion and what I do and why I do it is to serve the community by writing about what I learn and sharing my ideas around design systems. So you can find me on Medium. And also last year I built a thing, so I'm also a developer. I took on a TypeScript project to build this plugin that you select the thing in Figma, you click a button, and you get your anatomy. It describes all the properties and compares every single node of every attribute, and then also layout and spacing things too. So those are all things I do as a part of design systems. And so I call myself a design system architect. I'm a person that loves all the tokens and components and composition and configuration and all of those challenges. And I'm also a person that loves both sides of that fence that we talk about. I love to design things, and I also love to code things. And so I'm a bit of a purple unicorn when it comes to the blue and red. And so I'm also a person that has to manage system work, too, when I have clients bring me in. And so, there's this deflating sense of getting away from the fun and really, what is that even called? I like to frame design systems as a product that serves products. Our customers are designers and developers within our own companies. But am I the product manager? Am I the project manager? I'm actually a bit of both. And so instead of focusing on naming the darn thing, I do enough of that in token land, instead, what am I responsible to do? And so I'm called upon when I embed with teams or I pair with leads of teams to help them grow their skills to drive strategy, ensure quality, deliver the releases, align all those external stakeholders and workflows, and prioritize the roadmap of where we're going. And then also, in the background, foster collaboration within the team and lift their skill sets. So all those things are responsibilities that I'm going to walk through today because I'm going to try and answer the question, like somebody says, how does this work? How do you manage design systems? And really the first thing that they're asking is, not the only thing, is how do we produce robust, high-quality UI components? Tell me how the production line works. And so I say, oh, okay, I've got a sort of a model for answering that question. The question being, how do we produce features in a workflow across tasks like planning the thing, designing the thing, coding the thing, building the Figma asset for the thing, and how do we deliver these things across releases and big chunks of work we call initiatives that are all organized on a roadmap and visible on boards that everybody can work with. And so whether you're a designer or a developer that are really supporting a design system as a team of one, or you're someone like me, and I met one of you last night at the party that calls yourself the product manager of the design system that has a much larger team. Hopefully you can pull away some helpful tips as I go through answering each of these parts of the question. So let's start with the features of a design system. And so we produce lots of things in design systems. I talked about tokens and components. There might be UX patterns or content guidance. And we also produce lots of workflows and governance processes and training and strategy decks and analytics reports where we're measuring component use or other kinds of satisfaction things. And so when I'm talking about features and what I'm focusing on the production of today, I'm talking about the stuff on that side, the design tokens, the UI components, the patterns. I tend to define the features in a way that that's a lot of the team's work. The capacity that we have is really 3/4 of everybody's time in aggregate is spent making those things, even though we're also making lots of services and other kinds of things too. And so today, when I use the term feature, I'm talking about the stuff on the left. And so it's something that we make, we document, and we release it. It's typically versioned. It's often published across multiple libraries, not just your Figma library, but hopefully your web library, maybe your iOS library, your Android library, your Angular library. But you have these features like components and tokens that surface themselves in all of those places. And so, well, how do we make them? We need a workflow. We need a process to make those things. And so let's put ourselves in this alert component. You have breadcrumbs, you have buttons, you have tabs and checkboxes and so on. So just put your mental space into this one component that we need to deliver. And as you think about it, well, it's all about design and code, right? You have two steps. You have a designer does their thing, they hand it off to the developer to do their thing. They're typically different disciplines. So here, red representing design and blue representing a developer making code. And wouldn't it be nice if making a design system feature was this simple? But as it turns out, there's more steps of this process, because we also need to document the thing, which is distinct from a lot of product designers and developers' work that are shipping features to our end customers. They don't necessarily have to document how all those things work. And so beginning in 2016, when I started to formalize this workflow, separating the design process from the documentation, the use whens, the examples, all of the other guidance that go into it, and also then coming together at the end to publish the thing as a set of different outputs, the code library, the code docs, the design library, the design docs, and publish them all together at the same time. And we learned pretty quickly that, should we even be making this thing? Like, what are we going to make? What's the scope? How can we discover or plan what we're going to make? And that actually has its own definition of done that's separate from design. And then after that, we started to think about it, target the external stakeholders. As this workflow began to really grow and blossom, there was somebody outside the design and development team that we needed to give the work to review it, and then accept it so that we can move on with the rest of the stuff. And also, we started to see this tension between getting the design right and approved versus producing the reusable asset that designers are going to use later. Giuliano on the team got so frustrated because we would change the API, we'd change how the variants work when we're in code, we'd learn more things. It's like, I'm not doing my sketch kit until the end, until I know that the code is stable, and I get that. And so then I landed at REI, an apparel company in the United States in 2018. When I landed there, I said, wow, tell me about your process. And they were like, we read your Medium post, and we have 10 steps. I was like, 10 steps? That's a lot of steps. Seriously, 10 steps? So they started to highlight the fact that they have a production step where getting the design right and approved by, let's say, the design community, maybe the design leaders, like a director, was distinct from specifying the design in all of the minute details so that it can be built into all these different libraries. And also that they had a large enough team where the assignment of testing went to a person different from the person that wrote the code. And that's pretty rare since then. I haven't really seen that. But the fact is that they continue to form this 10-step process to fit how they worked. Ultimately, by now, really around 2020, the process has settled down to a repeatable thing that I've installed at a lot of clients, and they actually continue to use some sort of variation of what you see here, where there's a design process that feels a bit waterfall, it feels sequential, going from plan and design and specification into the production process, which isn't just about the code, but instead about all the outputs that we're trying to align to release them at the end. And so each of these things needs to have a directly responsible individual. Some of them, like coding, are obviously going to be a developer. Design tends to always be done by a designer. But a plan, well, it could be a developer doing a spike to do some exploration to define a new chunk of the technical architecture or a testing capability. It could be a content writer talking about a new information architecture of the content site in our documentation. And so varying and understanding who's assigned to do what is critical for me to make sure that I can go to a person and ensure that they're going to get the work done. And they're each going to produce a range of different, pretty typical outputs, particularly for components. Like, it's a pretty straightforward, templated kind of feel, at least at the highest level, of the kinds of styles, script, and code you're going to produce as a developer, or the variations and all the other things you're going to produce as a designer. And ultimately, I'm watching, when I'm managing this process, those production steps, because they're all actually occurring in parallel with one another. Is each one of them going to be ready to release or ready to publish, such that by the time we get to the end, in my view, the feature is ready to release if we're going to release all those things in sync. And sometimes you do, less often you don't. You let some things release, but we communicate the release when they're all done. And so, as these things as I've had this workflow over roughly now about 8 or 9 years, I've noticed change happening. And a couple of them, code is getting more expensive. In 2016, 17, and 18, it was vanilla HTML and CSS. It was like a bootstrap library. Now we're building very robust capabilities with a significantly higher amount of sophistication. In the same breath, like, it's not Sketch anymore. Everybody's predominantly using Figma, like 98% of the design systems I work with. And the capabilities in Figma continue to increase, which means the cost to make them robustly is also increasing too. But at the same time, some things are getting cheaper. Design documentation, now we have tools like Zero Height. We have a much clearer sense of what the template is. We actually acknowledge that people don't like to read documentation. Remember, documentation should first be a tool to use, then pictures to see, then ultimately, if you have to, words you have to read. And so from that perspective, easing the authoring, but also easing the amount of documentation you produce because the tools themselves reveal how things work, means there's a lower spend on design doc. And like I'll talk about briefly, automating the spec process also saves considerable time. As I think about the steps, too, I'm thinking about the reviewer effort on the far right-hand side in that column, where you've got different disciplines being brought in at different points in time, including developers early in the process, and other people that you might think this is a design-developer partnership. No, there are accessibility specialists we need to bring in, often at the design and code step, content specialists or designers to actually do the writing or ensure the writing of a designer and developer is good enough. And so as you think about the steps in your process, think about how you're opening them up to encourage the participation of a wider array of disciplines. And so let's dig into a few of the steps with a few tips. When you start early with a plan, really what you're trying to do is understand what you're going to make, why you're going to make it, and ultimately, if it's worth it. And from a design system perspective, we only have a limited amount of capacity to make all those things in that core library. So you have to ask yourself, is it worth it compared to all the other things that we could do instead? And so one of the things that I'll run early in that process, and I'll do it in whatever tool that we're going to use to track the work here in Asana Ticket, is just a rough outlining exercise. As we talk with the designer and also include developers and others, what kind of design explorations are we going to have to do to resolve this? What kind of open questions do we have? But even at the beginning of the plan stage, we're using things like, what's the anatomy of this thing? What elements is it going to include or not? Which stuff is going to be required or optional, do we think? Can we make some provisional assumptions around the kinds of properties that this thing might have? None of this is binding at the plan step. We haven't done the design yet, but we're at least using that kind of target state, the end in mind, to help frame expectations of what people are going to be making. And ultimately arriving by the end of that plan step, me thinking about the process is, did we decide, no, we're not going to do it? At which point, I communicate with the stakeholders that might have requested it, close the task, and we move on. Or yes, we're going to do it, and then it's up to me to ensure, do I know who is going to do the successive remaining steps? Has everything been allocated to a release? Can we start with, or frankly, design has already started, can we continue with the momentum that we already have? And so digging into that design step, when you think about breaking down design, it's not that hard. Like, just get the design done. Fully explore all of your ideas. You iterate Figma concepts. But when you're thinking about designing with a system in mind, there is an arc of work to your task. You get started, you make the thing, you might need to test the thing and share it with other people, ultimately have a detailed review, and then you deliver the thing. Frankly, every step of every assigned task we have really follows this same kind of arc. And using this kind of basic model, how can you highlight all the different things when you're making a UI component that you'll need to do? And when you highlight all of those different things, like styles and interactive prototypes, responsiveness, configuration of variants. What are the things that are actually distinguishing making a design system component from what a product designer does to deliver their work? And it reveals that the red stuff are often things that product designers don't have to do. And the yellow things really are things that they might do, or they often do, but not as rigorously, not necessarily to meet the shared needs of tens or hundreds of different other designers that are out there in your ecosystem. And then really one of the funny things is, what are the things that product designers do a heck of a lot more than people in design systems, and that's usability test. Because people accomplishing tasks is a user experience challenge that is enabled by user interface components. But when we're designing the component, for us to usability test it requires a whole lot of context. Certainly legibility, you can do that in isolation. Color contrast, do that in isolation. But if you're thinking about, is this modal interaction working? Well, it needs a lot of context there. And so you'll find that a lot of design system teams under-test the usability of their components because it's so darn expensive, and it lacks that context. Once the design is approved, you moved into this mode for specification, which tends to look like a big formal document. It might be called design spec or just simply the spec, where you're describing everything about how the interface is composed, configured, visually designed, all of its behaviors, and everything else. And so specs can be like exhausting from a designer's perspective. It's not everybody's cup of tea. I geek out on this stuff. If I could get paid to just make specs all day, it's not that bad. It's like puzzling. But it's really serving the purpose as a communication tool. How, when you're reaching the end of that design overall process, are you going to communicate not just to the developer coding your stuff, but also to the designer on larger design system teams that's writing the design guidance about that stuff. And another designer, not the designer that did the work to design the component, that's going to build the Figma asset to a certain level of production. Suddenly, all these different circles, to me, end up having all these different assignees. And so the handoff moment is really a communication moment where all these cross-functional assignees are hopefully going to be exhibiting the same thing by the end of the process. Now, I'm keeping my eye on API. Like, you've got the design API that's going to manifest itself in a bunch of Figma props, and you have a much, frankly, more sophisticated API that's going to be in the code. But there are opportunities where we can map those things together increasingly well. Figma's good enough now. Like, I'm in the middle of a blog post that I'm trying to write around the sorry state of states. Like, is disabled a state like hover? No, it's actually a Boolean prop. And so how can you model those things to be the same or sufficiently same enough across those different libraries? And so the specs give us a platform to have those conversations. All those highlighted yellow things like the names of elements or the names of options of each of the properties are the place that I'm trying to manifest conversations so that by the end, when we release the thing, they're all telling the same story. And so I built that plugin. You select a thing, you click a button, and here, it's organizing all that for you. But what I love about the plugin isn't just like I'm like really excited about building something and seem to solve a problem, but it also is a communication device. It's expressing intent in a very detailed and highly structured, predictable way so that the conversation can happen much more rapidly with a predictable artifact. Whether it's the anatomy and props, layout and spacing, or just all the styling that you have within there, how can you ensure that everybody, developers and designers alike, understand how it's going to relate? And that since it takes 2 seconds, it's utterly disposable. You can do it during an exploration, you can do it during the design process, you can do it as you're building a production Figma asset to test the asset to make sure you built it correctly. And take 2 seconds, paste it into a FigJam, and suddenly you're doing a crit, and you're adding all sorts of comments that, across whoever you're trying to bring together. And so, to me, I love that I build a plugin that generates a bunch of trash, because it's utterly disposable once the communication is complete. And so, as you think about your process, think about both sides of that handoff. That handoffs are really happening implicitly all the time. And if that's the case, how can you early on bring developers into that planning session? How can you bring developers into critique such that if you're doing a design critique and you have a bunch of Figma assets, run the plugin so that they can start to see how you're modeling your work earlier on. And so that once they start their coding process, they're better equipped to understand the shared model. With code, imagine that same arc of tasks. Here you see Similar kinds of things you need to make: script, style, structure, testing, more different testing capabilities that are pretty typical of design systems like functional and unit testing, manual and automated accessibility, and so on. But one of the other takeaways is, as you think about the things that you're doing, these don't necessarily need to take forever. If you've got a fix, really all you need to do is start a branch, change a line of code, essentially run all your testing suite, and then in 2 minutes, some other senior dev lead can look at your code and approve it, and you merge it, and you're done. And so even though you can build sophisticated processes, they need to be fluid and capable of being simplified so that they aren't bottlenecks. And you need to, as a design system practitioner, communicate it's not as complicated. It doesn't have to be complicated, and here's how it can be simple too. Also, how do you get feedback going the other way? If the designer is suddenly coming in with the spec and really strongly opinionated, hopefully weakly held opinions, how can the developer also have an opportunity at the beginning of their process to express what the API is going to be? And so I'm not a technical, senior level dev lead, anything like that. But I do like that some developers, like a colleague of mine, Kevin, really appreciated having a way in a Google Doc, one-pager, express those things in terms of here's the structure I'm thinking, here are the props I'm thinking, here's maybe some composable slots that I'm going to add, and suddenly that's really valuable, not just for the designer doing the spec, but the other designer doing the Figma asset. And so if they can see how the code's going to take shape, how it's going to emulate what the spec says, someone making a Figma asset too can be increasingly aligned. And so that is how I'm starting to think about after the handoff. How am I incorporating people like designers seeing the API emerging in another task, or in particular, designers and developers VQAing all those different outputs so that as we converge on that publish step, that they are going to be all synchronized and consistent across the things we made. Lastly, with the Figma assets, taking that same arc of tasks and starting to think about the things we do, one of the things I'll draw your attention to is, you plan your Figma assets? What does that mean? Didn't you already do your Figma assets in the design step? Aren't they already done? In fact, I try to diminish the amount of formal design, Figma asset work, production Figma asset, publishable things work in the design step, because that slows designers down from getting the design right. And instead, once the design really starts to take shape, how about we make some Figma components that emulate the Figma UI itself? This slide is now old, thanks UI 3. But the point is, we have components for that so that I can then really quickly mock up what's the prop panel going to look like without building the thing. I get so frustrated when I see a designer on my team only expressing how the experience of the Figma asset is going to work by building the entire thing. It's such a waste of time when instead we could produce a number of different ways to think about the level of nested variants or instances that we have, how those props are going to expose themselves, what the labels are going to be. Just draw it in Figma. And suddenly that is generating a lot of really constructive conversation to save us time. Also, you test Figma assets? That's a long list. What do you mean you test? Well, there's a blog post for that, but the point is there's lots of different things that you can check, like is the metadata correct? Does it have the correct description? Is it namespaced correctly? Also, all the elements have layer names? Yeah, I'm going to have the conversation around layer names when 300 designers are looking through the layers of the component that we published. That matters a lot more than just one developer that I'm trying to correspond with to deliver something the next day. And ultimately, I'm also paying attention to layout and the flow of different content. Is content going to collide because they didn't relate the X in the dismiss with the heading that's in the alert that you see in that blue example at the top? And so, yeah, we do tests. We have visual test cases. We can even compare them. And so this starts to, in smaller teams in particular, start to invoke the question of, well, if you're making a Figma asset that is for production designer or product designers, and you're making this spec, which is really intended for system designers and system developers, if you've got all this automated, can you just have one asset that serves both purposes? And for some teams, the answer is yes. Particularly if you're automating your spec, it starts to consolidate down to being one step or feel like two parallel steps that one person's doing at the same time. And so even there, even though you see a whole list of, or a whole flow of 8 different steps to get a component done, it's up to you to fit that, to converge or assign things to the same person to make your process go more smoothly. Now, oh my gosh, Nathan, like way too many checklists. Like, I'll give you access to the slides at the end. There's a link for that. But so you're saying if you do design systems right, you have to get all of these different things checked across all of those different stages of each of the tasks represented by distinct column? And the answer is no. You grow into these things. There are things that you're naturally going to do or already do that are going to feel like they're already green. There's going to be a bunch of stuff in red that you're going to decide isn't how far we need to take our design system. And so the conversation you ultimately need to have is about the yellow stuff. Let's discuss if we need to grow our practice, if we need to evolve to do things better. And we're never, like, I've never worked on a design system that entire grid of things is green. Never. Not even close. And that's okay. And so now that we've got these components and we've finished the process to make them ready to release, what does it mean to me as a person managing design systems for it to be ready to release? That means the design and code libraries, as well as both the assets for them and the documentation of them, is ready so we can communicate those changes to all the people. And so, to me, this is like the model I start to see in my head. I have all these tasks on the far right in order to deliver a feature like a card component. And now we've got a lot of components coming down our production line. I need to assign them to releases, here being made evident by what might be a monthly cadence. Other teams are a sprint cadence of every 2 weeks. Some teams are a continuous release process, in which case the communication gets bundled up with a cadence of monthly or twice a month, what have you. And so I'm thinking about, like, what's the best way to make this kind of release roadmap visible to people. At Target, still my favorite example, they actually built what I call a doneness matrix onto their whiteboard, which was literally about 5 steps from the elevator sort of area on the 3rd floor of their building in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where you could see all the components that they were delivering in rows, all the different steps that they were taking as columns, and you'll notice that they aren't all named the same thing. The code step, they called it the build step. Sure, sounds great. But you can also use this as a way to generate conversation if you put it in a place that everybody can see. Working remotely more often now, this is harder, and so is this going to be published on your Confluence site, or actually on your design documentation site, or somewhere else, so people can see what are you working on now, what are you working on next, what can we expect to wait for a long time for you to deliver. And so I try to simulate that kind of appearance too in Asana. I appreciated a designer on one of my teams said, well, we can make custom columns for our releases board such that we have the August release at the top, and then the September release underneath that, and then collapsed releases in October, November, and December. But we have columns now that every week we meet for 1 hour, and we talk about the status of each of the features, particularly in the next release that is coming up. And everybody working across disciplines has a good higher level sense visibly of where the work is. By the time we start to approach that release day, here indicated on the right-hand side with that green column, we're going to communicate this to everybody else. How do we have Slack messages? Maybe there's a dev and a design channel, both dedicated to the design system. Do you support email? Are there other ways that you're going to communicate it? And so I'm going to need somebody to write that copy. Is it going to be me? Not usually, actually. It's often a content designer on the team. But I'm thinking about managing it, and I want to make sure that we're done, because in between getting the copy done is we need to produce all the final images of sometimes components that are still like in flux as we're approaching the release day and we're making minor changes. And then I and the design director and the dev lead are all going to want to VQA the thing so we can see that the communication looks good. And that copy didn't just all appear in one day. It actually, we scoped it a week or two prior to that. What's the main message we're trying to send with this release? Who's going to draft it? And just as well as finish the copy. And this is just one part of a much bigger communication cycle, because before that, we're also changing the site content, release histories, a blog post, what have you. And both those come after actually releasing the code packages and publishing the Figma assets, which comes after changing all the content in the Figma library, which everybody is accessing anyway, which is drawing in the question, like, should we even have a zero-height site if all the designers just want to live in the core library file? But that content in the core library file, including its own version history, a sticker sheet, other kinds of things we need to check. Oh my goodness, we have an Asana template task that has 54 subtasks. I didn't even show you all of them here. But they're already all pre-assigned, and we do, if it's once a month, everybody knows what the role is going to be, and that they can back out from the release day about when they need to get each of those tasks done. And so to me, that's glorious. Like at one of my clients, we've been doing it this way for about 18 months, and it's wonderful because all the expectations are set across a team of 25 people who needs to do what. So that's releasing components, but there are other things that design systems need to do, which I'm going to use the term initiative here, but you might say mission, epic, some other bigger chunk of work that you need to scope. It's going to have a lot of tasks in there, and you're going to drive towards outcomes and outputs to solve a problem, usually within a period of time. And so an example that came up recently was a modality initiative. Like, we need bottom sheets, but we actually need partial takeovers too, and sometimes it's going to be a full takeover, and that's different than the actual modal, and we're going to have to deal with some elevation, and it's going to create some new tokens, and it's all so that we can implement these things consistently across all our products. And so we call the bigger initiative modality. But that really existed within all sorts of different initiatives that we could choose to pursue. And even though I'll continue talking about modality, the team chose not to pursue that one because there's always the black card in the middle. We're going to continue making components, tokens, other core things. But we also might want to pursue composability, or improving the parity of our web and native libraries, or improve how designers get onboarded onto the system. And all of those have a planning process behind them that thinks through problem statements, outcomes, outputs, and so on, such that once you get a good structure for trying to describe the things you want to pursue with your design system, you can create artifacts like this one, which is a pretty simple spreadsheet that has a sensitizing thumbnail. It's got a problem statement. It actually had a lot more data, and we talked with a range of stakeholders to ask them the question like a workshop through a conversation. Which ones must we do, should we do, could we do, which ones shouldn't we do? And suddenly we're getting this robust data across all of the different people in our community that we support. And if you're interested in this, that's a whole different talk Jules Forrest gave at Figma's Schema conference about 2 years ago. Jules and I worked together to create that, and it's really a wonderful way for you to think about getting input from broader initiatives and seeing where you should go. And that charted a roadmap for her. Actually, we worked together on it for the subsequent 18 months. But my takeaway from that was also how people reacted to the process. That senior leadership, once they started to see all these high-level things that you could do, suddenly investing in the design system made a lot more sense to them. It wasn't just, okay, you're going to produce 5 or 10 more components. I can not really value that much because the next component you make is probably going to be less valuable than the component you already delivered. And there's that diminishing return. And suddenly, these things end up looking more important to them. Also, it reframes things because the product manager that says, I really came in here highly opinionated, you should be working on X. But then I saw A, B, and C, and yeah, those for everybody. You start to see and appreciate the shared need the whole org has, and they start to respect the kind of decisions you're making to scope things. And that leads to you being able to have this roadmap that's visible to folks that pairs things like feature development with, okay, this half year we're going to pursue web and native app parity. We're going to make a charts library, and we're going to improve the composability, which means we're going to work on our modals cards and a few other components, and that's it. But you need flexibility there. And so the question then becomes, once you commit to those, well, what's going on with our big bets? What's the status? And so while I'm going to close with some boards, this is probably the least valuable one. It's really only for me. Even my design director doesn't look at this. The person who funds the design system work doesn't look at this board that much. But what active initiatives are currently being worked on? What are all the other things that you could be working on? And what's the impact and size of each of those? Such that that becomes the top node of all these tasks of this initiative, where we have some discovery we do, and then we start delivering features as outputs. So from a modality, it might be doing a lot of discovery and comparison auditing across design systems in our own spaces, ultimately to deliver the kind of tokens and modals and bottom sheets that I talked about before. And so zooming way out, the model then looks like this. On the far right, you have tasks that you need to complete in order to deliver a feature like a partial takeover that's going to be slotted into a release like the August release, ultimately to deliver or progress the delivery of a modality initiative, that it's going to take many releases for you to fully deliver all those different things. And they are going to be intermixed with lots of other components and work across other initiatives too. And so they're all visible on boards, right? Yes. So as I set up this stuff to project manage design systems, I'm thinking about roadmaps and releases. Those are different boards. Those are mostly the ones that I'm managing. You have a design board that the design lead manages, maybe multiple dev boards, one per library that we produce. And suddenly these boards, if well managed with good data in them, become the basis of each of the meetings of rituals that we have, like stand-ups for dev and design, or the planning meeting on the far right, which is the one I talked about. We have weekly. The dev leads, the design leads, and some other managers all attend that, and we know where we're at with each of our releases. And we have a good structure to do that. One of my favorite things is that we've got a to be prioritized bucket at the top of every board. If you're a designer working on something and you want to talk to the team about it, where do you have a bucket to put it so that your team can discuss it the next time they convene? And so whether you call it to be prioritized, whether it's in Asana, having those buckets to drop those things to talk about is the problem to solve. The last problem I'll talk about is actually how to take in things. So if you have design and dev communities you're serving, they're going to ask you for things. Fix this defect. Make this feature. Actually, I want to propose a contribution I'm going to make, or I just need to get help. And so having a way to understand if it's design or dev specific things, can we flow them into the boards and have them be assigned by a trafficker to immediately start working on? Or at times, we need to route those things into a place, even though it came from a designer or a dev, into the place we plan together. That releases board that is once a week that I talked about, so that we can talk about, is this a thing this design system should care about? Because if it is, let's slot it into a release, or let's start the work now. But if it isn't, let's put it in the backlog or put it in the trash and communicate to the person, not that it's trash, but that we won't be able to support what their need is. And so as you think about intake, think about the places and the ways that those tickets are going to flow through all of your boards to get the work done. Ultimately, I hope you have some takeaways around how to manage your design system, whether you're a developer or a designer, or ideally, each of you working together. I'd love to talk to you afterwards. I'll be out in the break room near the books, I believe, and thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much, Nathan. That was quite a lot stuff right there. And so, what would you say? I mean, this is probably also one of the questions that came up. So you are maybe like a small UX team, and it feels like so daunting to be even trying to establish sort of a design system in the first place. And I guess one of the questions that came up very quickly from Lukas, what would be the smallest design systems team that you absolutely need for success of a design system?
You can make a design system with one person. And so it might not produce all the outputs you'd want to have. You're not going to get a web library of code and a Figma library of design assets and all of those things. You might not have a deep token taxonomy through 50 components. But one designer could start a design system that has a good visual foundation, has design assets that have 20 or 30 components in it, and has 5 or 10 teammates that start to use those things. And that is a great start, and that is creating business value. So while I characterize this big sort of model of all these interdependent parts, you can still have a much smaller model, choosing the kinds of things you want to pursue, and it still creates sufficient business value for existing.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Bruno is wondering, so I've been in a few companies that believe that a design system shouldn't be seen as a project, but do it a bit on the side. How would you convince people to invest time into it?
So sometimes I talk about creating a design systems team. And I thought he was going to go the other way, like it's not just a project, but I like to think of the design system as a product, because we have customers, we release things incrementally over time. And when you snap that model into place, you start to think about, or people start to realize, well, you're producing outputs that are going to generate outcomes, and we need people to do the work. And people to do the work doesn't mean 2 hours on a Friday afternoon, or 10% allocation of one person. When I talk about teams, the first slide is, I call that part-timers. I said, this is the team, and it's a blank slide. There's nobody to dependably produce anything. And so it's when you start to think about managing it and producing the results you need people to do the work. And what I see these days is often a design system team gets defunded, essentially taken down, and then 6 months later they're flabbergasted that the components aren't changing. Our councils aren't like spending any time on this. We created these different sort of groups of advocates, but they all have their quote-unquote day jobs that they're not going to finish because their product managers are asking them to do stuff too. And so I just don't see that as realistic, and that gives a consultant a good opportunity to help them reform and start it up again. But if you can't get the people to do the work, you're not going to be able to shape it.
Yeah. Well, the next question is actually coming up every single time when there's a conversation about design systems. Andrew is wondering, how would you drive a design system adoption in a long-standing project where product teams are focused on feature releases?
It really depends on where the product's at in its life cycle. And so as you think about the design system's relevance to those products, if you've got a new product that's emerging from the ground up and you've got an established, mature design system, if they choose to not use the system, there is a poor goodness of fit that we need to ask serious questions. They should be using the design system. But as the product becomes more emergent, it's been around, it's still evolving quickly, but then it gets to where it's a mature product, they're doing regular releases. You have to equate to, let's say, one organization had a chart that had maturity of the product in one scale and level of UI investment, none, less, the same, or more compared to last year. And the more they're going to be making a UI investment, the more you want to inject the design system in that, because that should be the foundation of new UI things. But if they're not making a significant investment in UI and there's no galvanizing big North Star refactor going on, then it might not be the right business decision for that product to adopt your design system in the next 6 or 12 months. Yep. It might be that you can focus on creating value elsewhere. It doesn't mean your design system's not good. It's just not the right fit at that time for that product.
I also really like this idea of target 2 for the doneness matrix, right? Where you can basically see what's happening, who is working on what, and so on and so forth. Once, I think it was maybe also 8 years ago, I was just walked in with a friend in a company in Germany, and they had something similar, but it was different, where they basically cut out all the components that they had, but in a very kind of high-level design. It wasn't like a specific design from Figma or whatever, but just a cutout. And so then, whenever they would be working on a new flow or so, they would get together, and they would just mix things up, and, okay, we're going to use this component here and that component here and this layout to kind of build up this page. And it was incredible, because I remember coming there, and I just jump into this meeting which they had, and it was so fast. And they came up, like engineers, designers were not forced to make decisions about what tokens are we applying here and stuff like that. It was just really incredibly fast iteration where, okay, this is what we want to do. And then they would have this meeting and where they just jump in mirror, and they start looking and thinking about all these fine details. So I kind of really like this idea. I think its visibility is probably something that really helps also to kind of make a case about, how you're working and what you're doing, right? It's not a question. It's just, I guess, a statement, at this point. But
no, like I relate to that because this is a visual language. An interface is a visual way to navigate through all of these things. And so if you understand what the catalog offers you in terms of all the different parts, and you can either quickly assemble them because you know the parts and you know the pattern you want to create, or ideally the design system is exhibiting itself with a number of pre-made patterns, not to implement, but foster an understanding of how the pieces get put together, then the act of composition is really fast. You don't need to worry about all your silly spec design token visual attribute stuff. You're composing experiences by putting bigger chunks together. That's the goal.
Yeah. Snowflakes.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yes, Michael is wondering, how do you handle snowflakes? Items that don't end up in the design system, how do you keep track of them? Should you?
Some of them, sure. The key concept that I come to is shared need. And so as a team in some local project space is making something, and it's clearly evident that it's a shared need of many other teams, I'm paying attention to the work. I might be injecting myself a bit into the work to help them shape what they are still responsible for and what they will continue to maintain. I only care about bringing it into the design system if it makes sense to deliver it across all the different outputs that we have, that it's going to meet a broad shared need. And so sometimes that local work they are very proud of, or it might only meet the need of 1 or 2 other teams, but we're serving 50. And so while you might think the right rule of thumb is once it's reusable or once a third team needs it, it belongs in the core library. That's not the case. If you have 20 or 50 or 100 different teams, it needs to be, the opportunities we're going to pursue in the core library are not going to be the 1Z, 2Z, 3Z kinds of shared needs. We need something broader than that. And so I'm fine to help them make it visually consistent, help them understand how the system fits with the nested parts that they're using from the system, but keep it local, and leave it there.
Anna is wondering, when starting a design system from scratch, would you follow all the steps? I guess the answer is no in your presentation. Or would you pick a group of critical ones? And if you do, how do you pick the critical ones to work on?
So Dan Moll talks about pick the component that is going to essentially meet a concrete need that a team has that you can get your design system started. And I like the ethos of creating momentum, developing relationships, and letting that be a way to start to establish your visual language. The situations I find myself as a consultant are in large organizations where, frankly, the core catalog is almost predicting itself. We know we're going to need buttons. We know we're going to need inputs and checkboxes. We know we're going to need some form of containerish, card, tile-ish thing. And so we know what all those different pieces are. And if we're serving that big of a group, then making a really custom map panel kind of experience isn't for us because it's not a shared need. So I'm trying to balance those two things. I want to find out what kind of components are going to give us the momentum and business impact to continue validating the worth that we're giving the org, but also how am I developing a good foundation of core things that most of the people are going to need.
Two more great questions, so I have to really bring them up. One of them was where you mentioned different contributors when working on a design system. Does it have to be a design system team, or can it be a community-style effort where multiple teams work together and contribute to building and maintaining a design system? And do you have any guidance or recommendations on how to actually make it work well?
So I get a little cranky when people say, I use a model that I blogged about 10 years ago called the central versus federated model. Central being a group that is allocated to work as oftentimes a product squad or bigger to make the design system, and federated being just everybody's making components in the ecosystem that they all share together. And that created this unintended either or, but never both perception, and that to pursue a federated dream is something that people should do to start. I've never seen that work by itself in the design systems I've worked on, but I have seen starting with a central team and then growing gradually to incrementally add additional contributors from the rest of the community, such that you have a good balance of central and federated. But I've never seen a lack of some people allocated to make the system grow over a long period of time. You need some core maintainers, or otherwise you're saying, here's your blank Figma file, here's your repository that doesn't have a folder or a file in it, go forth and make components. It's not that chaotic, but it's not that far away from that either if you just start a federated system. So I don't believe in that. I don't think that's something that you should start with.
All right, excellent. And the last one, and then of course if you have more questions you can also ask Nathan directly next to the membership stand. How can you measure the value of the design system to make the company invest more on the design systems team?
I don't know, that's a sort of measurement, that's a topic that maybe you should answer.
We're going full circle. Yeah. We're going full circle.
The things that you want to think about with your design system and measuring whether or not it's successful are first the inward ones, the simpler ones, which are, did we make the stuff that mattered, and did they use the stuff that mattered? Where usage is often, did they use the components, like what's our coverage or adoption rate? The second of three sets of things are the people using them feeling successful? And those tend to break down into they are satisfied with how they're using the system, and they're efficient or fast with the system. And frankly, the efficiency one is incredibly hard to measure accurately. I have a stats degree, and there are so many conflated factors in what makes something fast or fast to produce. But still, that's the number one thing people actually care about. The third and final set are like, what's the impact on the end users, like our actual customers? And consistency is something that everybody brings up as the leading quality of things, but measuring consistency is also very expensive and hard and not terribly precise. But other qualities like, is it accessible? Is it more usable? Is it more performant from a front-end perspective? All those are qualities that impact the user that the system has a significant role in. So those are all sorts of things you could measure, even though I would argue that the most important one is efficiency.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your wonderful insights, Nathan. I'm looking forward to hear more from you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.